Do you really think you can wear that thing and get away with it? A sharp, mocking voice cut through the morning bustle of Willow Creek High. Arden Rivers froze for a heartbeat, her fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. The laughter that rippled through the hallway wasn't polite. It wasn't casual. It was meant to sting. She didn't care about attention. She wore the jacket for one reason and one reason only. It belonged to her grandfather, Elias Rivers, a man whose presence on the road had been legendary, whose leather and chrome had once gleamed under the sun along endless highways. The jacket wasn't just clothing. It was memory, tribute, and a whisper of the freedom he embodied. The reflection in the glass of the classroom door showed Arden clutching the worn leather, the deep tan soft from years of travel and care. Faint traces of motor oil and smoke lingered in the fibers, the smell of open roads and adventure that she'd always imagined accompanying him on his rides. Around her, the hallway seemed to compress, whispers, stifled giggles, and eyes that judged. And there he was, Miles Camden, leaning against a locker, smirk perfectly curved, as if he'd invented cruelty that morning. "You really think that jacket makes you special?" Miles taunted, stepping closer, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "Wearing your dead grandpa's biker gear like some homage. You're pathetic, Rivers." His words were meant to wound, and they landed with precision. Arden felt the heat rise in her face, a cocktail of grief and anger mixing into a hollow ache in her chest. She remembered her grandfather's funeral like it had happened yesterday. The rows of black leather jackets at the wake, the soft rumble of engines that paid tribute, the scent of burning incense mixing with exhaust. She remembered how Elias had smiled even in death, a weathered man whose eyes had seen 100 towns and 1,000 roads, who taught her that honor was more than law. It was loyalty, courage, and the kind of kindness that left a mark on people's lives. Arden wore this jacket because of him, not for anyone else. Miles reached out and grabbed the collar, fingers pinching the leather. "Don't think I won't make you regret this," he sneered. Arden recoiled, shoving him back with every ounce of strength, the sound of the scuffle echoing down the hallway. A sharp tear sounded, and she realized in horror that a patch had been ripped, her grandfather's secret symbol, hidden beneath layers of stitching, revealed to the world in an instant. Chaos erupted. Teachers appeared from around corners, voices shouting. Officer Bennett, the school's resource officer, moved with a calm yet intense gaze, his eyes locking on the torn patch like it meant something deeper. Arden's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the sense that the patch, the jacket, was part of something bigger than her, something alive that her grandfather had left for her to find. "Arden, go to the office now," a teacher commanded. But as she walked past Miles, she felt a strange thrill of urgency. This was more than schoolyard bullying. This was a puzzle, a legacy, a secret meant for her alone. Later, when she sat in the quiet office, she slid her hands along the jacket's lining and felt it. A small, cold object tucked into a seam, a key, and beside it, a note in her grandfather's careful handwriting. "Go to the Crescent Diner off County 12. Ask for Sparrow." Arden's breath caught. This wasn't just a jacket anymore. It was a map, a message, and a summons. Officer Bennett's gaze had lingered on the torn patch longer than normal, his posture unreadable. Arden couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he should, that the jacket had drawn attention from people who walked a line far outside school rules. Her pulse quickened as she slipped the key into her pocket. The hallway outside whispered with movement. She had to move before someone else learned she had discovered something. She noticed a security door slightly ajar and made a quiet escape through the service corridor, adrenaline sharpening every sense. Overhead, the fluorescent lights flickered, echoing like the rhythm of engines on a road at dawn. Once outside, her phone buzzed. A single message appeared, chilling in its simplicity. "We saw the key." Arden's stomach tightened. She knew in that instant that the road her grandfather had left for her wasn't just a memory, it was dangerous. The County 12 Crescent Diner loomed ahead, its neon sign flickering gently in the late morning light. Arden's jacket caught the attention of everyone in the small parking lot, eyes lingering, whispers following her as she pushed through the door. She asked for Sparrow. The waitress, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a presence that seemed to radiate authority, looked up, recognition sparking. "You've been touched today," Sparrow said without preamble, pulling Arden into the back storage room and locking the door. The diner's hum faded behind them, replaced by the soft rattle of jars and the smell of coffee and old wood. "This jacket," Sparrow said, pointing at the tear in the symbol beneath, "is a signal. Your grandfather. He hid something that doesn't belong to the people who run this town. That key? That's your path. And if anything happens, this pendant," she held up a small spoked wheel emblem, identical to the hidden symbol. "Show it to the first rider you see." Outside, engines hummed faintly in the distance. Arden's heart leapt. The roads she had never ridden were alive again, calling, and somewhere out there, her grandfather's friends, the riders, were waking, ready to answer the signal. Arden's hands shook as she clutched the small spoked wheel pendant Sparrow had pressed into her palm. The dim light of the storage room painted the walls in shadows, the jars and boxes around her suddenly feeling like barricades against a world she didn't fully understand. Sparrow's voice was calm but urgent. "Your grandfather didn't ask for a favor. He called in debts long owed. People like him don't just leave something behind. They leave a trail, a path, and riders who'll answer." Arden swallowed, trying to steady her breath. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape, but she knew she was already on a road she couldn't turn back from. Her grandfather's jacket, the torn patch, the key, and the note, they weren't just relics of a past life. They were a summons, a map to a mission she didn't yet understand. Before she could speak, a sudden noise outside the diner made her flinch, a low, dragging shuffle followed by a cough. Sparrow's eyes narrowed. "They know," she said, almost in a whisper. "Someone's already watching. Stay close to me." Arden's stomach twisted. She'd thought the hardest part was confronting the bullies at school, but this was something entirely different. Someone had been tracking the jacket, the key, perhaps even her movements. The message on her phone, "We saw the key," was no idle threat. It was confirmation. A soft knock came at the storage room door, deliberate and slow. Arden froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "Who is it?" she demanded, though her voice quavered. The door rattled slightly. A low voice, muffled but sharp, spoke through the thin wood. "Arden Rivers, give it up. The key. The jacket. Now." Her eyes widened. Sparrow's hand went to a drawer beside her, pulling out a small metal bar that could lock the door from the inside. "Stay calm," she murmured. "They don't know who they're dealing with." The footsteps outside grew louder. Arden instinctively held up the pendant. Its weight felt reassuring, a solid reminder that she wasn't entirely alone, that her grandfather had prepared for this moment. The hooded figure outside cursed under his breath. "We've been cleaning up your grandfather's mess for years," he said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Arden's mind raced. Cleaning up his mess? She didn't fully understand what he meant, but it was clear. The man wasn't here for conversation. She needed time. She needed backup. She needed the riders her grandfather had promised would arrive. Sparrow pressed herself against Arden, speaking quickly. "We can't stay here forever. They'll break in eventually. You need to get out, and we need to signal them. Are you ready to trust them?" Arden nodded, gripping the pendant. She didn't even know what it meant to trust these strangers, these riders. But she trusted Elias. She trusted the jacket. She trusted that the weight of decades of loyalty and honor could protect her if she followed the path he had laid out. The door handle rattled again, more aggressively this time. Arden and Sparrow exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. Sparrow counted softly, then pressed a hidden button beneath the counter. A metal panel slid open in the floor, revealing a narrow crawl space leading out to an alley behind the diner. "Go," Sparrow urged. "Quickly, keep the pendant visible. They'll know." Arden dropped to her hands and knees, sliding into the crawl space, heart pounding. The smell of wet asphalt and fried food mingled as she emerged into the alley. The hooded man and another larger figure, a man with a scruffy beard, were waiting at the alley entrance, their faces partially hidden in shadow. "Hand it over, girl," the hooded man growled. "You think that jacket and key make you special?" Arden's fingers brushed the pendant beneath her jacket. She held it up, the spoked wheel glinting faintly in the morning light. Instantly, a strange tension shifted in the alley. The two men froze for a fraction of a second, a subtle recognition crossing their faces. Then the low rumble of motorcycle engines rolled in from the distance. At first it was a whisper like thunder beneath the earth. Then it grew, multiplied, a chorus of chrome and leather, of rubber meeting asphalt. Arden felt a thrill of disbelief. This was it. The riders. They were answering the signal her grandfather had left decades ago. The hooded man cursed. Shit! They're coming! Arden's fear didn't disappear, but it was joined by a fierce surge of determination. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't alone. She was walking the path Elias had prepared for her, guided by his foresight, his loyalty, and the unbreakable code of the riders. Sparrow's voice came from the diner doorway, calm but firm. Trust them. Show them the pendant if anything happens. You'll be safe now. Arden tightened her grip on the key in her pocket and the pendant over her heart. The alley seemed to shrink, every shadow now a potential threat, every engine a promise of protection. She realized she had entered a world where rules were unspoken but absolute, where loyalty and courage were the only currency that mattered. Engines drew closer, the sound of tires on wet asphalt blending with the rhythmic pulse of Arden's own heartbeat. The riders were forming, a living wall of chrome, leather, and power. The hooded man looked between Arden and the approaching roar, his confidence faltering. The bearded man's eyes widened in recognition, but it was too late. Arden's grandfather's legacy was here, and it was undeniable. "Move, girl!" the hooded man spat. But Arden didn't flinch. She stood tall, the jacket heavy on her shoulders, the pendant shining. She understood now. Elias had never wanted her to hide. He wanted her to be ready, to be brave, to step into the path he had prepared. The motorcycle's engines filled the alley now, a symphony of loyalty, discipline, and collective strength. Arden could feel it through the soles of her boots, through the vibration in the air, through the sheer presence of dozens of riders who had answered a call from decades past. And as the first bikes rolled past, she caught a glimpse of a tall, weathered man in a leather jacket adorned with the same spoked wheel symbol. His eyes met hers, steady, calm, and commanding. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of her courage, of her grandfather's trust, of the beginning of her journey. Arden inhaled deeply. The world she had known, a world of school hallways, bullies, and whispered cruelty, was gone. The road ahead was wide, open, and alive. And for the first time, she felt the weight of the jacket as a shield, not a burden. The hooded man snarled and retreated, the bearded man following, but Arden didn't look back. Her eyes were on the riders, on the promise of protection and guidance, on the unspoken bond forged by loyalty, honor, and the chrome-lit paths of the open highway. The roar of engines faded into a steady hum as the first riders arrived at the alley's mouth, their silhouettes framed by the morning sun, gleaming chrome catching every ray. Arden's heart thumped in rhythm with the motors, a mixture of fear and awe coursing through her veins. The lead rider, the tall, weathered man she had glimpsed moments before, stepped forward from his bike, the leather of his jacket creaking as he moved. His presence radiated authority, calm and unshakable, a man who had lived on the highways and carried the weight of decades of loyalty and courage. Arden Rivers. His voice was low, measured, but it carried through the alley like a command. Arden nodded, her fingers tightening on the spoked wheel pendant. "Yeah," she said, trying to steady her voice. I'm Elias Harper's granddaughter." The man's eyes softened slightly. "Good. Elias prepared for this. You've held on to his jacket, and that was the first test." He gestured to the torn patch, now clearly visible beneath the flap of leather. Arden's stomach tightened at the sight, the symbol her grandfather had kept hidden, now exposed, signaling to the riders that she was ready, that she carried the legacy forward. One by one, the other riders dismounted, their movements precise, coordinated. There was no chaos, no idle chatter. They formed a semicircle around Arden, their presence protective, almost ceremonial. The sound of engines, once threatening in its sheer power, now felt like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. Arden realized for the first time that this was more than just muscle and motorcycles. This was discipline, camaraderie, collective vigilance, and moral strength, all the values her grandfather had lived by. Sparrow stepped beside Arden, her gaze shifting toward the riders. These are the ones Elias trusted. They're here because of him, because of what he did, because of the debts he called in long ago. And now, they're here for you. Arden swallowed hard. She had always imagined her grandfather as a larger-than-life figure, but seeing the riders in person, seeing their respect for him and now for her, it was almost overwhelming. She felt a strange mixture of pride, grief, and determination. A sudden alert made her glance over her shoulder. The alley's mouth was still open, and there, partially hidden behind a stack of crates, she could see movement. A pair of figures watching, waiting. The hooded man from earlier, accompanied by the bearded follower. Arden's chest tightened. They hadn't given up. They had been tracking her every step, and now with the riders assembled, the tension was almost palpable. "Don't worry," the tall man said, sensing her unease. "We'll handle them. You focus on what comes next." He motioned for one of the riders to approach Arden. A younger man, his jacket adorned with subtle symbols, handed her a small notebook, leather-bound and worn. "Your grandfather left instructions," he explained. "Names, places, details. He prepared for contingencies like this." Arden's fingers trembled as she opened the notebook. Inside were handwritten notes, diagrams, and a series of coded messages. She recognized a few locations from the notes Sparrow had given her: the diner, certain cross streets, a few cabins tucked away in the outskirts of town. The key in her pocket suddenly felt heavier, more significant. It wasn't just a key to a lock, it was a key to a network, a carefully constructed system of trust and protection her grandfather had built over decades. The tall man stepped closer. "There's more than just your grandfather's legacy at stake," he said quietly. "Some people have been trying to erase it for years. That key, that jacket, they're more than symbols. They're proof, leverage, and a call to action." Arden nodded, determination hardening inside her. She realized she couldn't shrink from this, couldn't hide behind fear. Elias had prepared her for this in ways she hadn't understood, through stories, through his teachings, through the jacket she now wore like armor. The hooded man shifted, stepping slightly forward, his voice rising in irritation. "Hand it over! You don't understand what you're messing with!" The first rider, a broad man with streaks of silver in his hair, revved his engine lightly, the vibration carrying through the alley. The hooded man froze, then spat on the ground. "You think motorcycles scare me?" he growled. "It's not the motorcycles that matter," the tall man said calmly. "It's the people on them, and they answer to a code older than you can comprehend." Arden felt a surge of reassurance. These weren't just random strangers, they were guardians, bearers of a tradition her grandfather had cultivated, a network of loyalty, honor, and moral responsibility. She understood now why Elias had trusted her to carry the jacket, to hold the key, to follow the instructions. She wasn't alone. Sparrow leaned in, whispering, "They're not here to fight, they're here to protect. But you need to move carefully. These people watching you, they won't give up easily." Arden took a deep breath. The alley was silent now, the engines of the riders idling like a heartbeat, steady and calm. She held the pendant, the key, and the notebook close. Every step she had taken, every moment of fear and doubt, had led to this point. She was ready. The tall man nodded to her. "You'll need to trust them," he said. "If anyone tries to take what's yours or tries to touch you, show them the pendant. That's all the signal they need. And Arden, remember, loyalty isn't just about being brave. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." A distant siren wailed faintly, signaling the approaching threat beyond the alley. Arden's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. The rider's presence was steady, a protective wall of chrome, leather, and unspoken honor. And as she looked at them, The promise of her grandfather's legacy, of the paths he had cleared for her, became real in a way she had never imagined. The alley was alive now, not with danger, but with purpose. Arden Rivers, wearing her grandfather's jacket, holding the key to his secrets, and carrying the pendant as a symbol of trust, was no longer just a frightened girl. She was a part of something larger, a living continuation of Elias Harper's life, his lessons, and his unwavering code. And the riders, engines humming softly, were ready to answer the call, to protect, and to ensure that the legacy of loyalty, courage, and moral responsibility would survive through her. The alleyway had fallen into an uneasy silence, the engines of the riders now idling like guardians standing watch. Arden River's chest heaved as she tried to steady herself. The weight of the pendant and the key a constant reminder that she was carrying far more than a piece of leather or metal. She was carrying her grandfather's legacy, his secrets, and a path forged in courage. "Keep it close," Sparrow whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from Arden's face. "If anyone tries to get their hands on it, the pendant is the signal. The riders will respond immediately. Your grandfather made sure of it." Arden nodded, but her eyes were drawn to the shadows at the end of the alley. The hooded man and his companion hadn't moved. They were waiting, patient and calculating, like predators who understood instinctively that Arden was both the target and the key to something much larger than themselves. Arden's pulse quickened as she realized that leaving the alley would mean confrontation, but staying wasn't safe either. She clutched the pendant, feeling the cold metal against her skin, and slid the key from her pocket. The small notebook her grandfather had left, full of names, dates, and coded directions, rested against her chest. She could almost hear his voice, calm but insistent. "Trust the code. Trust the riders. Trust yourself." The hooded man stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. "Hand it over, Arden. You don't understand what you're holding. You could ruin everything Elias Rivers built." Arden's eyes narrowed. "I understand more than you think, and I'm not handing anything over." She held up the pendant. The spoked wheel symbol glinted in the sunlight filtering through the alley. Immediately, the first rider, the tall, weathered man who had stepped forward earlier, shifted slightly, signaling others. Engines roared softly in unison, a warning and a promise. The hooded man cursed under his breath. "Do you hear that?" he growled. "They're just motorcycles." "They're not just motorcycles," Arden said, her voice steadier than she felt. "They're people. People who follow a code older and stronger than your threats." For a moment, the alley seemed to hold its breath. The bearded man at the hooded man's side hesitated, unease flickering across his face as if he recognized the symbol or sensed the history behind it. Arden felt a surge of confidence. Her grandfather had prepared for this moment. The riders, the pendant, the key, they were all part of a system of protection and loyalty he had built carefully, methodically, over decades. The hooded man moved faster this time, stepping toward her, but the engines outside escalated, a chorus of synchronized power that reverberated through the walls of the alley. The riders weren't coming into the alley yet. They didn't need to. The sound alone was enough to force a pause, enough to signal that Arden wasn't alone. Sparrow's hand found Arden's shoulder. "Now," she whispered, and Arden understood. She turned and ran down a narrow side path leading to a back street, her feet pounding on the asphalt, the pendant swinging lightly with each step. The key was clenched in her fist, warm against her palm, a physical connection to her grandfather and the network he had built. From behind, shouts erupted. The hooded man and his companion were giving chase, but Arden didn't falter. The riders' engines followed, echoing through the streets, guiding her path. She darted around corners, slipped through alleys, and finally reached a quiet section near the outskirts of town, where the roads opened up. Here, the first riders arrived alongside her, motorcycles braking smoothly, engines idling. The tall, weathered man dismounted and gestured for her to hand over the notebook. "Let me see it," he said, calm but firm. Arden complied, feeling the trust and the responsibility weigh heavier than ever. He flipped through the pages carefully, noting names and locations, nodding to himself. "This is exactly what Elias wanted preserved," he said softly. "And now, Arden, It's your responsibility to keep it safe. The people chasing you, they've been trying to erase his legacy. That key, that jacket, they are proof, leverage, and a message to anyone who thinks they can take what's his. Arden swallowed, the gravity of the words settling in. She understood now why Sparrow had been so insistent about moving quickly, why her grandfather had left such precise instructions, and why the riders had answered the call so swiftly. It wasn't just protection, it was the preservation of a code, a moral system, a network that valued courage, loyalty, and honor above all else. Suddenly a siren pierced the morning calm. Arden froze. Sparrow's eyes widened. "They're escalating," she said. "Local authorities, maybe federal. They're on their way." The tall man assessed the situation, his eyes sharp. "Stay calm. The key and the pendant are your shields. Hand nothing over. Follow the plan." He gestured for Arden to climb onto a motorcycle. The younger riders positioned themselves on either side, forming a protective formation. Engines roared and the convoy began to move, slow at first, then gaining speed, weaving through the quiet streets with precision. Arden's heart raced, but she felt a sense of control. She wasn't fleeing blindly. She was guided by the code her grandfather had left, by the riders who honored that code, and by her own courage, which had grown with every challenge she faced that morning. From behind, she could hear the faint roar of cars accelerating, sirens closer now. But the convoy held formation. Arden looked down at the pendant, then at the key, then at the riders surrounding her. She understood fully she wasn't alone, and she would not be intimidated. Elias Rivers' legacy was alive, and she was a part of it. And as the convoy turned onto the main road, engines thundering in a symphony of loyalty and discipline, Arden knew this was only the beginning. The world she had stepped into, the world of riders, of codes, of moral courage and protection, was vast, dangerous, and alive. And for the first time, she felt ready to meet it head-on. The convoy moved with precision, engines humming like a heartbeat that pulsed through Arden River's chest. Every rider flanked her, creating an unbroken wall of chrome and leather. She gripped the spoked wheel pendant in her hand, the weight of it grounding her, reminding her that she was part of something larger, something her grandfather, Elias Rivers, had spent a lifetime building. The key in her pocket seemed heavier now, as if it carried not just metal, but responsibility, proof, and secrets waiting to be revealed. Sparrow rode beside her, eyes sharp and alert. "They're not giving up," she murmured, her voice calm but edged with concern. "Local deputies, possibly federal agents. They know the key exists. They know you have it, and they'll escalate if they think they can intercept it." Arden swallowed, the reality settling in like a cold fog. She had expected bullies at school, threats in hallways, maybe even a confrontation in the diner, but she hadn't expected law enforcement of any kind to be involved so quickly. And yet, as the convoy snaked through the town's back streets and side lanes, she understood something critical. Elias had anticipated this. Every twist, every hidden path, every protective rider was part of a strategy that had been decades in the making. A sudden siren pierced the morning air, sharp and urgent. Arden's pulse leapt. She glanced behind the convoy and saw flashing lights weaving through traffic, a fleet of local deputies accelerating, trying to intercept the riders. Sparrow's expression remained composed. "Stay calm," she said. "The pendant, the key, follow the formation. They can't touch you if we hold together." The tall, weathered man, the lead rider, spoke through a communicator clipped to his jacket. His voice was low, steady, authoritative. "All units maintain formation. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Arden's safe passage is priority one. Eyes forward and keep her shielded. They're desperate, but discipline wins every time." Arden's chest tightened. She didn't fully understand the depth of her grandfather's network yet, but seeing it in action, the discipline, the coordination, the silent acknowledgement of authority among the riders, gave her a strange, reassuring strength. She realized Elias had not just built a group of friends or allies. He had forged a force of moral guardians, people who answered to a code older than any courthouse, any sheriff, or any lawman trying to intercept them now. The convoy turned onto a quieter route, a road lined with oak trees and faint patches of sunlight breaking through the canopy. Arden could hear the sirens fading slightly in the distance, but she knew it was temporary. Local law enforcement was persistent, and somewhere beyond the trees, federal agents were likely already mobilizing, alerted by the commotion. She glanced down at the key again, feeling the embossed numbers and letters her grandfather had etched into it. Each marking was deliberate, a breadcrumb left for her to follow. Sparrow leaned closer, whispering, "There's a safe place ahead. Elias prepared it long ago, a location the local authorities can't touch without revealing themselves. It's your next step." Arden's brow furrowed. "Safe place? You mean a bank?" Sparrow nodded. "Yes, only there can we ensure the next part of his plan is secure. That's where the key leads, and where the riders can truly protect you while you access the information Elias left behind." The mention of a bank made Arden's stomach tighten. She had never imagined her grandfather's secrets would lead her into direct confrontation with both local and federal authorities, and yet she felt no fear. Not exactly. Not. There was a strange clarity in knowing that she had prepared for this unknowingly, that every lesson Elias had taught her, every story about loyalty, courage, and discipline was coming to life now. Ahead, the convoy slowed as they approached the bank. The riders fanned out, positioning themselves strategically around the entrance and the surrounding streets. Arden dismounted carefully, feeling the pendant against her palm, the key pressing against her pocket. Sparrow joined her, sliding her arm through Arden's as they moved toward the front entrance, a living shield of riders flanking them on every side. Suddenly, a black SUV appeared, sliding into the street nearby, slow but deliberate. Arden's pulse leapt. The same vehicle she had seen in previous days, the one she had suspected was tracking her, was attempting to follow. But before it could reach the alley or the street where they had traveled, several riders intercepted, revving engines and creating a barrier that forced the SUV to halt. Arden felt the surge of the engines through her boots, a reminder of the discipline, strength, and unity surrounding her. Sparrow whispered urgently, "They're trying to control the narrative. Don't let them intimidate you." Elias prepared for this. The key, the pendant, they signaled the riders, but also the moral authority behind the action. Keep moving. Inside the bank, Arden could see a small security office, a line of cameras in the vault in the back. The path was clear but tense. Every step she took echoed against the marble floors, each footfall measured and deliberate. The riders remained outside, engines rumbling softly, ensuring that no one could breach their formation without consequence. Arden held up the pendant one last time, feeling its cool weight, and whispered to herself, "I'm ready. I can do this. I can follow his path." She slid the key from her pocket, examining it in the dim light. Every notch, every curve felt like a direct connection to Elias, a lifeline to the knowledge he had entrusted only to her. And as the convoy outside braced for any interference, Arden Rivers took a deep breath, stepping forward toward the vault that held her grandfather's secrets, ready to unlock not just a safe deposit box, but the legacy, the lessons, and the courage Elias had instilled in her, and in every rider who had answered the call. Arden Rivers' hands trembled slightly as she inserted the small brass key into the lock of the safe deposit box. The quiet hum of the bank, combined with the low rumble of engines outside, seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. Every movement felt deliberate, every sound magnified. She had never handled so much responsibility before. Not a piece of leather, not a pendant, not even the key itself. But now everything was concentrated here, in this small, metal box that held her grandfather's carefully concealed legacy. She turned the key slowly, hearing the soft click as the lock disengaged. The box door creaked open, revealing a manila envelope and a small black flash drive nestled atop a pile of folded papers. Arden carefully lifted the envelope, her eyes scanning the handwriting she instantly recognized as her grandfather, Elias Rivers. The letter inside was meticulous, precise. It listed names, dates, locations, and notes about people and events long hidden from public scrutiny. Her grandfather had documented allies, debts called in, favors owed, and, most importantly, records implicating certain local officials in unethical activities spanning years. One name stood out immediately: Sheriff Daniel Halverson. Arden's stomach twisted as she read. Her grandfather's foresight had prepared her not only for protection, but also for confrontation with entrenched authority. The flash drive promised more, though Arden couldn't see its contents without a computer. The envelope also contained instructions: how to use the drive, whom to contact, and what precautions to take. Every word emphasized one core principle: discretion, courage, and reliance on the writers who had answered the call. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the bank's lobby. Arden froze, the key still warm in her hand. Two men burst into the vault room, deputies from the sheriff's office, their badges flashing, voices sharp. "We have an emergency order for a missing minor," one barked, "and we're here to secure this box immediately." Arden's pulse leapt, but she didn't panic. She held up the spoked wheel pendant. "Back off," she said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is private property. I have every right to access it." The deputies hesitated, glancing at the pendant. Arden noticed the subtle shift, the recognition of authority beyond their badge, a moral authority symbolized by something they didn't fully understand. Before they could advance, the vault door opened further, and a tall, imposing figure entered. Special Agent Pierce, flanked by counsel, a federal agent with a commanding presence. "Step back," Pierce said, his voice controlled, authoritative. "This young woman is under federal protection while accessing her grandfather's property. Any interference, and you will be held accountable." The deputies exchanged uneasy glances, muttering about jurisdiction, but it was clear they were outmatched by the weight of federal authority combined with the symbolic and literal protection Arden had. The pendant, the riders outside, and now Pierce and counsel inside. Arden exhaled slowly, keeping her hands steady over the envelope and flash drive. "I found this in my grandfather's jacket," she said, her voice firm. "It's not just about me, it's about what he left behind. And no one is taking it from me." Pierce nodded. "We understand, but we need to document everything. Counsel, assist her while we record the process. We need a full chain of custody on these materials." Outside the bank, the riders had created a living perimeter. Engines idled low, tires blocking any direct path. Arden could feel the power of their presence without seeing every face. The black SUV that had followed her earlier remained stalled, trapped behind the formation. The drivers inside exchanged nervous glances, realizing that Arden's protection was not just a human shield, but a network of people bound by loyalty, courage, and decades of experience. Back in the vault, Arden carefully removed the flash drive and inserted it into a laptop counsel had prepared. Files appeared: spreadsheets, scanned documents, emails, photographs. Every piece meticulously organized, detailing years of activity and connections. Arden's eyes widened as she realized the full scope of what Elias Rivers had preserved. This was a ledger of power, influence, and moral obligation, evidence of long-buried truths and proof of wrongdoing. At that moment, the deputies tried to step forward again, but Pierce raised a hand. "Stay where you are. You are being recorded, and any attempt to seize this evidence without a warrant will be treated as obstruction of justice." Arden felt a mix of relief and defiance. She had known her grandfather's work would put her in danger, but seeing federal authority combined with the rider's protective presence gave her a profound sense of empowerment. She wasn't alone and she wasn't powerless. Sparrow leaned in, her voice low but urgent. "Remember, Arden, this is just the first step. The ledger, the drive, everything here. It's more than proof. It's leverage, and you need to move carefully. Elias's plan didn't end with you opening a box. There are people who will try to control the narrative, to make this about fear rather than truth." Arden nodded, her hands steady now. She understood. Her grandfather had anticipated every obstacle. Every ally, every rider, every document had a purpose. She wasn't just protecting her own safety, she was carrying forward a system of moral responsibility, loyalty, and courage that had been tested and refined over decades. Then from the bank's entrance, Arden caught sight of movement. Sheriff Halverson himself, flanked by more deputies, striding toward the building. Arden's chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. The riders outside, the federal agents inside, and her own growing resolve made her unafraid. She knew now that Elias' legacy wasn't just about secrecy, it was about standing firm in the face of threats, about asserting moral authority when it mattered most. Arden Rivers, wearing her grandfather's jacket, clutching the key, holding the pendant, and now stewarding his ledger and flash drive, felt the full weight of responsibility, and she understood for the first time that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting decisively in spite of it. The sound of boots on marble echoed through the bank as Sheriff Gregory Halston entered, flanked by a pair of deputies. His face was tight with tension, eyes scanning the room like a hawk searching for prey. Arden Rivers felt a wave of apprehension, but it was immediately tempered by the steady presence of counsel and Special Agent Pierce behind her, and the faint rumble of engines through the windows, a reminder that the riders had formed an impenetrable cordon outside. "Step aside," Halston barked, his voice carrying authority honed over decades of office. "This young lady is under our jurisdiction. That key, that flash drive, and the ledger, everything in that box belongs to the sheriff's office until we can verify it." Arden met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "No," she said firmly, her voice echoing through the vault. "Everything in that box belongs to my grandfather, Elias Rivers. He left it for me, and I'm not handing it over to you or anyone else without cause." Halston's eyes narrowed. "Cause? You have no idea what you're meddling with. Step aside, girl, or I will make you." Before Arden could react further, the pendant around her neck caught the light. She instinctively held it up. The room seemed to pause, the air thickening with tension. Outside, the low, synchronized hum of motorcycles rose slightly, a subtle reminder that the riders were listening, waiting, ready to act. Even within the confined space of the bank, their presence felt palpable. Counsel stepped forward, her badge visible and her stance commanding. "Sheriff Halston," she said, her voice firm and unwavering, "your office is currently being observed under federal jurisdiction. Any attempt to seize this property without proper authority will be considered obstruction of justice. Stand down." Halston's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists. Arden could see the conflict in his eyes, years of authority, experience, and power colliding with something he couldn't control. The legal weight of federal oversight combined with the symbolic weight of the riders outside. Special Agent Pierce's voice cut through the tension like steel. "Arden Rivers has legal claim to these items. Your deputies have no standing here. Move back or face immediate consequences. We are recording everything." Arden's chest tightened with adrenaline, but she felt a surge of clarity. She understood now that fear had no place here. Not when her grandfather had prepared her, not when the riders had answered the call, and not when federal law supported her actions. She took a deliberate step forward, holding the key and the flash drive securely in her hands. "I'm not backing down," she said. "No one is taking this from me today." The tension escalated further as one of Halston's deputies attempted to reach for the flash drive. Instantly, a series of low-engine roars surged through the street outside, engines revving in perfect unison. Arden could feel the vibration through the floor, a tangible pulse of power and readiness. The deputy froze, glancing toward the windows, realizing that any action would trigger an immediate and coordinated response from the riders outside. Halston's face darkened, his control slipping. "This is interference," he growled. "You can't allow these vigilantes to dictate actions in my county." Sparrow, standing beside Arden, leaned in and whispered, "They aren't vigilantes. They're guardians. Elias made sure of that. They follow a code, and right now their code protects you." Arden nodded subtly, her resolve hardening. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the letter, holding it up. "These are my grandfather's records," she said, her voice firm and steady. "They document his life, his work, and yes, your office's involvement in ways I'm only beginning to understand. I'm accessing what's mine, and you have no legal standing to interfere." Halston's eyes flicked toward Pierce and counsel. They were calm, methodical, unmoved by his attempts at intimidation. Arden realized that this was exactly the balance Elias had intended. She wasn't fighting alone. She had protection inside and outside the building, legal authority on her side, and the moral weight of her grandfather's legacy. The sheriff took a slow step back, though his glare never wavered. He gestured for his deputies to hold position. Arden noticed the slight hesitation in their posture, a recognition of the complicated situation. Outside, the convoy of riders subtly shifted, engines humming lower now, a soft, continuous threat that they were ready to intervene if needed. Arden exhaled slowly, her hands steady. She could feel the gravity of the moment, the convergence of local power, federal oversight, and the moral force embodied by the riders. Every element was aligned. Every precaution her grandfather had anticipated had been met, and the next steps, accessing the drive, following the ledger, ensuring the information was secure, were now within reach. Counsel stepped closer to Arden. We need to document the contents, create a chain of custody, and ensure you are protected during the transfer. The sheriff's presence complicates matters, but with these precautions, nothing can be taken from you without direct federal action. Arden nodded, the weight of responsibility settling fully on her shoulders. She was no longer just a scared girl in a jacket. She was the steward of a legacy, a living connection to Elias Rivers, and a participant in a system of moral courage that had been decades in the making. Outside, the riders maintained their positions, eyes scanning the perimeter, engines low but ready. Arden realized that the combined forces, federal, moral, and organized, formed a formidable shield, one that even the sheriff's office could not penetrate without exposure. As she prepared to access the flash drive, she whispered to herself, "I can do this. I will do this. Elias trusted me, and I won't fail." The pendant glinted in the bank's overhead light, a tangible reminder of courage, loyalty, and the unwavering moral compass that her grandfather had instilled in her. And now Arden Rivers was ready to honor it. The atmosphere inside the bank grew taut with anticipation, every movement deliberate, every sound amplified by the marble floors and high ceilings. Arden Rivers stood at the center of the vault, clutching the brass key in one hand and the flash drive in the other. Her fingers felt the smooth metal and plastic, tangible connections to her grandfather Elias Rivers' decades of foresight. Outside, the riders had positioned themselves with military precision, engines humming softly, ready to respond at the first sign of aggression. Sheriff Gregory Halston's deputies shifted uneasily near the vault entrance. The sheriff himself hovered just behind them, jaw tight, fists clenched, his authority challenged in ways he had never anticipated. Arden could feel the tension radiating off them like heat from a furnace, but she remained steady, focused on the task ahead. She had learned over the past hours that fear would accomplish nothing. Clarity and action were her allies now. Counsel stepped forward, her presence imposing and controlled. "Arden, we need to document everything on the flash drive while maintaining security. The sheriff's men cannot interfere, and any attempt will be recorded immediately. Proceed carefully." Arden nodded and inserted the flash drive into the laptop on the vault desk. The screen flickered to life, displaying folders and files meticulously labeled: financial records, correspondence, photographs, and scanned documents. Each file represented a thread in the complex tapestry her grandfather had woven, a ledger of debts, favors, alliances, and evidence of corruption reaching into the local sheriff's office. One of the deputies moved as if to block her view, his hand reaching toward the laptop. Instantly, the low rumble of engines outside escalated into a synchronized growl. Arden felt the vibration through her boots and floorboards. Every rider outside shifted, engines ready, signaling a unified response to any threat. The deputy froze, eyes widening as he realized the gravity of the situation. "You will not touch that," Arden said firmly, holding up the spoked wheel pendant. Its gleaming surface caught the light, a silent assertion of authority that went beyond law, beyond titles, and beyond fear. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over," he growled. "You don't understand what you're meddling with. Step aside now." Arden's chest tightened, but her resolve only grew. "I understand exactly what I'm doing. My grandfather trusted me with this for a reason. I'm not stepping aside, and you have no legal authority to take it from me." Counsel moved to stand directly behind Arden, her badge visible. Sheriff, any attempt to seize this property without federal sanction is considered obstruction. We are recording all actions. Stand down immediately. Arden carefully opened the first folder on the flash drive. Names, dates, and locations scrolled across the screen. Every document was a testament to Elias Rivers' meticulous planning. Evidence of past corruption, of favors owed and collected, of alliances built on trust and moral responsibility. Arden realized that her grandfather hadn't merely preserved memories. He had created a map for justice, a ledger that would expose wrongdoing while safeguarding those he protected. From the street outside, the riders adjusted their formation. Engines hummed lower now, a subtle but constant reminder of their presence, a tactical shield of loyalty and discipline. Arden felt the surge of reassurance. She wasn't just a girl in a jacket with a key. She was the linchpin of a network of protection and moral authority, alive and ready to act. The sheriff barked orders again, but his voice wavered. The combination of federal agents inside, Arden's calm authority, and the rider's silent yet palpable force outside created a balance he couldn't easily disrupt. Arden scanned the files, noting references to hidden accounts, secret meetings, and people her grandfather had helped over the years. People who, like the riders now, were bound by a code of loyalty and justice. Sparrow leaned in, her voice low but urgent. Arden, focus on the ledger first. The files you're opening are proof, but the flash drive has the details we need to verify and act. Once we finish documenting, we can secure it and move it to a location only you and the riders can control. Arden nodded, eyes scanning the data. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on her, but the clarity of her purpose made her steady. Every entry she reviewed reinforced the importance of the task. Elias had anticipated interference, threats, and attempts to control the narrative. This ledger wasn't just evidence, it was leverage, protection, and a moral compass. Suddenly, the vault door rattled slightly. Arden's heart leapt, but she remained composed. One of the sheriff's deputies had tried to push through, testing boundaries. Immediately, a soft, synchronized roar of engines echoed through the streets outside. Arden could feel the shift in the riders' formation, the subtle but unmistakable readiness to respond with coordinated force. The deputy froze, understanding instantly that any action would provoke a response beyond his control. Arden held up the pendant, her voice calm but firm. "You are not authorized. Step back." Halston's jaw clenched. His authority was undeniable in everyday circumstances. But here he faced forces beyond his reach. Federal agents documenting every move, Arden asserting her rightful claim, and the riders outside embodying decades of discipline, loyalty, and moral courage. Counsel glanced at Arden, giving a slight nod. "Keep going. Document everything. Do not let them intimidate you. They are testing the limits, but you are protected. Remember the code, the pendant, and the riders. They are your shield." Arden exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She was no longer just a girl caught in a web of threats and intimidation. She was the heir to a legacy, a participant in a network of moral courage, and the central figure in a carefully orchestrated plan her grandfather had designed to protect her and to expose the truth. With deliberate care, Arden Rivers continued her work, scanning files, verifying information, and preparing for the next steps. Outside, the engines of the riders vibrated like a heartbeat of loyalty, a rhythm of protection that would not waver. Arden's gaze shifted to the flash drive, then to the pendant, and finally to the bank doors. The sheriff and his deputies could observe, threaten, and protest, but they could not breach the moral and physical shield surrounding her. And in that moment, Arden understood fully. The legacy of Elias Rivers was alive, disciplined, and unstoppable. She was its custodian, and nothing, not fear, not authority, not intimidation, would deter her from fulfilling the task he had entrusted to her. The tension inside the bank thickened with each passing second. Arden Rivers felt it in her bones, the sharp energy of anticipation, the cold edge of danger pressing in. Sheriff Gregory Halston and two deputies were clearly growing desperate. Their calm facade had evaporated, replaced by subtle but undeniable aggression. Arden's eyes flicked toward Special Agent Pierce and counsel, who remained composed, their presence a firm reminder that federal authority backed her actions. But the sheriff's men weren't going to wait for legalities to slow them down. One of the deputies suddenly lunged forward, reaching toward the laptop that displayed Elias Rivers' meticulous records. Arden's heart jumped, and instinctively, she raised the spoked wheel pendant in front of her chest. A low, synchronized rumble rose outside, the engines of the riders like a warning chorus, vibrating through the floorboards, through Arden's boots, and into the very air of the vault. The deputy froze mid-step, his hand twitching, as the sound of dozens of motorcycles surrounding the bank became palpable even indoors. He glanced at Halston, whose face was taut with frustration. The sheriff barked an order, but the deputy hesitated, realizing the weight of Arden's protection extended far beyond the four walls of the bank. Arden's chest tightened with adrenaline, but she remained steady. "Step back," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "You are not authorized to touch any of this. My grandfather entrusted it to me. No one else has claim." Halston's eyes narrowed, veins standing out on his forehead. "You're a child meddling in things you don't understand. Step aside, or I will make you." Before Arden could respond, Sparrow leaned close, whispering, "Brace yourself. They might try physical force, but the riders are ready. Hold the key, the pendant, and stay calm. Every move is coordinated." Suddenly, the deputy made another attempt, moving toward the vault desk. In an instant, the sound of engines outside intensified, growing into a low, synchronized roar that shook the windows and rattled the doors. The riders had repositioned, creating a human and mechanical wall around the bank, their motorcycles angled to prevent any vehicle from approaching and to give them full line-of-sight control of the area. The deputy froze again, the reality of the situation finally registering. Outside, the riders' disciplined formation and subtle engine signals were a silent threat. Any aggressive move would provoke immediate, coordinated response. Arden could feel their vigilance as tangibly as the cool metal of the key and the pendant against her skin. Arden exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "This ends now," she said firmly, holding up the pendant. "You will not touch the ledger or the flash drive. Not today, not ever." Halston stepped forward aggressively, but Pierce moved between him and Arden, voice cold and unwavering. "Sheriff, your office is under federal observation. Any interference is recorded, and any assault or attempted seizure will result in immediate legal consequences. Stand down." The sheriff's fists clenched at his sides. Arden could see the tension in his eyes, the clash between local authority, moral code, and federal law. It was a battle he could not easily win. Arden, for the first time, felt a rush of clarity. Fear had no place here. She had the key, the flash drive, the pendant, federal protection, and outside the riders, silent, ready, and disciplined. She moved deliberately toward the laptop, scanning through Elias Rivers' records. Each file she opened confirmed her grandfather's foresight, the intricate network of debts, favors, and alliances he had cultivated. Names of people who owed loyalty, who were bound by code, and records implicating the sheriff and his deputies in questionable activities. Every document was proof, but also a statement. Elias Rivers had anticipated obstruction, threats, and intimidation, and he had left her the tools to counter it. Sparrow leaned in once more. "Focus on the files that detail the ledger first. The flash drive is your key to leverage, your evidence of truth. Don't let intimidation distract you. The riders are your shield. Pierce and counsel are your authority." Arden nodded subtly, her fingers moving with precision over the keyboard, opening folders, noting names, and cross-referencing dates. She realized fully now that her grandfather's work was more than a record. It was a moral blueprint, a system of accountability designed to protect the innocent, expose wrongdoing, and ensure that those who were loyal and disciplined could act decisively when needed. Outside, the riders subtly shifted again, engines humming in a low continuous rhythm. They were not idle observers. They were ready, their presence a living extension of Elias Rivers' plan. Arden could feel their readiness as an unspoken message to the sheriff. Any aggression here would not go unanswered. A sudden movement at the bank entrance made Arden glance up. Halston was signaling deputies to attempt a coordinated push. The air seemed to thicken with tension. Arden held the pendant, the key, and the flash drive close, taking a deep, grounding breath. The moral weight, the responsibility, and the presence of the riders lent her a courage that surpassed fear. Sparrow whispered, "Remember, Arden, discipline wins. Elias built this network to protect you. Every rider, every federal agent, every precaution, it's all part of the plan. You're safe as long as you hold your course." Arden's jaw tightened. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. She returned her focus to the files, methodically documenting, cross-referencing, and securing her grandfather's legacy. Outside, the low hum of motorcycles remained, a reminder that her protection extended beyond the walls of the bank, grounded in loyalty, discipline, and moral authority. And in that charged silence, Arden Rivers, wearing her grandfather's jacket, holding the key and flash drive, and backed by riders and federal agents alike, felt the full weight of responsibility and the unwavering clarity that she would not falter. Not today, not ever. Arden Rivers' fingers hovered over the flash drive, her pulse steady despite the electric tension filling the bank. Every file she opened, every piece of evidence she scanned, brought clarity to a lifetime of secrets carefully hidden by her grandfather, Elias Rivers. Names, dates, financial transactions, and covert correspondences illuminated the breadth of his work. She realized that this wasn't just a ledger, it was a map, a moral compass, and a shield for everyone Elias had protected over the decades. Outside, the riders adjusted their formation, engines humming low but synchronized, a subtle yet commanding presence. Each motorcycle seemed to pulse with discipline, a living testament to Elias' plan. They were ready to act instantly, in perfect coordination. Arden could feel it through the floorboards, through the pendant resting against her chest. She wasn't alone. The bank doors rattled as Sheriff Gregory Halston slammed his hand against the frame. "Enough!" he roared. "Step aside and give me the drive." His deputies pressed forward, moving with the desperation of men who felt their authority slipping through their fingers. Arden's eyes flicked to Pearson Counsel, who remained calm, but the tension was palpable. This was the moment Elias had prepared her for. Confrontation under pressure, with consequences far beyond herself. Arden gripped the spoked wheel pendant and held it high. "You will not touch this," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "This is my grandfather's property. I am the rightful custodian, and you have no authority here." Halston snarled, stepping closer, and one deputy made a move toward the laptop. Instantly, the low growl of motorcycles outside escalated into a synchronized roar. Arden felt the vibration under her boots, like the heartbeat of 100 riders ready to respond. The deputy froze mid-step, realizing that any physical aggression would trigger a coordinated, formidable force beyond his comprehension. Special Agent Pierce's voice cut sharply through the tension. "Step back. Any attempt to seize this evidence without federal authorization will be treated as obstruction and assault on a federal agent. Move now, or be held accountable." Halston's face darkened with frustration. He had spent years controlling his county, commanding obedience through authority and fear. But here, every lever of power he knew was neutralized. Arden's moral claim, federal oversight, and the rider's disciplined presence outside formed an unassailable shield. Arden exhaled slowly, centering herself. "I'm accessing the files. I am documenting everything. This is about truth, not fear." She began scanning the flash drive, meticulously cross-referencing dates and names. Each revelation reinforced the meticulous foresight of Elias Rivers. He had anticipated threats, obstruction, and intimidation, and had provided the tools to counteract them with both wisdom and moral authority. From outside, the riders shifted subtly, engines humming in perfect rhythm, creating a tactical perimeter. Their coordination was flawless, a living reminder that Elias' plan extended beyond the walls of the bank. Arden could feel the weight of their vigilance as surely as she could feel the cool metal of the key in her hand. Halston barked another order, his desperation mounting. "You don't understand what you're meddling with. Hand it over." Arden's gaze met his, unwavering. "I understand perfectly, My grandfather trusted me with this for a reason. You will not take it from me. Not today. Not ever. Sparrow leaned close, whispering, Remember, Arden, the riders are ready to act at any sign of aggression. Pierce and Council are your legal shield. Maintain control and calm. Discipline wins here. The deputies exchanged uncertain glances, and Halston's jaw clenched. Any further move risked immediate confrontation. Outside, the synchronized hum of motorcycles rose again, signaling readiness and discipline. Arden felt the subtle shift, the unspoken message. Any aggression would be met with coordinated, overwhelming force. Carefully, Arden accessed a critical folder on the flash drive. Names and dates illuminated the ledger's most sensitive entries, evidence directly implicating Sheriff Halston in multiple unethical operations over the past decade. Photos, emails, and scanned documents confirm what the ledger had hinted at: manipulation, coercion, and misuse of authority. Arden's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from understanding the magnitude of what she now held. Suddenly, one of Halston's deputies attempted to grab the drive. The synchronized roar of engines outside exploded into a low, commanding vibration that shook the building. Arden felt it in her chest, in her arms, in every nerve ending. The deputy recoiled instantly, realizing the presence outside was not symbolic. It was immediate, disciplined, and ready to respond. Counsel moved swiftly, her voice authoritative. Stand down. Any interference will be recorded as a federal offense. Do not test this further. Arden exhaled, her hand steady. She held the flash drive, the key, and the pendant like shields of trust, loyalty, and moral responsibility. Every file she had scanned reinforced her grandfather's careful planning. She was now the central node in a network that combined legal authority, moral courage, and disciplined action. An unstoppable alignment of purpose. Outside, the riders subtly repositioned, their engines vibrating in unison like a living drumbeat of protection. Arden knew that any attempt by the sheriff's men to seize the ledger would be met instantly with precision, strength, and unwavering discipline. Pierce glanced at Arden, giving a slight nod. You're doing exactly what Elias intended. Keep scanning, keep documenting. Every move is being recorded, and your protection is absolute. Arden's chest rose and fell, steady and controlled. Fear had no place here, only clarity, action, and the knowledge that she was the rightful heir to a legacy built on courage, foresight, and moral responsibility. She realized fully the power of the riders, the authority of federal agents, and the foresight of her grandfather had converged perfectly. She was safe, she was empowered, and she was ready to see the plan through to its next critical stage. And in that charged silence, punctuated only by the low hum of engines and the quiet intensity of federal oversight, Arden Rivers felt the full weight of her inheritance. The ledger, the flash drive, the key, the pendant, and the moral code passed down by Elias Rivers. She was not just protecting evidence, she was asserting truth, justice, and the disciplined courage that had defined a lifetime. Arden Rivers carefully closed the final folder on the flash drive, her hands steady despite the adrenaline that still coursed through her veins. Each document, photograph, and ledger entry had been meticulously verified, every detail cross-checked against her grandfather Elias Rivers' notes. She felt a quiet surge of satisfaction, not just for having successfully accessed the information, but because she now understood the full weight of what she held. This was more than evidence. It was the culmination of decades of foresight, loyalty, and moral discipline. Special Agent Pierce leaned in, watching Arden's every move with sharp eyes. Good. Everything is accounted for. Now we need to secure the drive and the ledger in a location outside the reach of anyone who might attempt interference. His gaze flicked briefly toward Sheriff Halston and the deputies, who lingered near the vault entrance, tension etched into every line of their faces. Arden noted the subtle shifts in their stance, a mixture of frustration and calculation. They realized they were powerless to act without risking immediate legal and physical consequences. Outside, the riders' engines vibrated in a low, synchronized hum, a steady reminder of their presence. Arden could feel the protective pulse reverberating through the floorboards of the bank. Each rider, positioned strategically around the building, maintained line of sight and communication through subtle cues, shifts of the body, the angle of a handlebar, a barely perceptible change in engine pitch. Elias Rivers' legacy wasn't just in the documents. It was alive in these men and women, disciplined and coordinated, ready to defend her at a moment's notice. Counsel stepped closer, her voice calm but authoritative. Arden, we'll need to move the materials to a secure transport. The riders will form a protective cordon outside while federal agents accompany us. You'll be shielded at every step. Arden nodded, understanding the gravity of what was about to happen. The sheriff and his deputies were clearly calculating their next move, but they faced the undeniable reality. The combination of federal authority, Arden's moral claim, and the riders' disciplined vigilance rendered any aggressive action futile. Halston's jaw tightened, his frustration boiling over. You can't just remove these items. They belong to my office until we verify. Pierce cut him off sharply. Sheriff, your office has no claim here. Arden Rivers is the legal custodian, and any interference is a federal violation. Stand down. Arden felt the surge of moral clarity her grandfather had cultivated in her. Fear had no place now, only measured, deliberate action. She adjusted the pendant at her neck, feeling its cool metal against her chest, a symbol of loyalty, discipline, and protection. It grounded her, reminded her that she was not alone, and that every move she made carried the weight of Elias's foresight. The flash drive and ledger were carefully placed into a small reinforced case. Arden's hands moved with precision, every motion deliberate, reflecting the calm discipline she had learned over the past hours. Sparrow stepped forward, double-checking the documentation and ensuring every piece of evidence was accounted for. Outside, the riders shifted subtly, engines vibrating in perfect rhythm, a living barrier, alert and ready. Pierce and counsel escorted Arden to the bank's side entrance, where the convoy of motorcycles had positioned themselves strategically. The riders created a perimeter around the SUV that awaited them, engines humming in disciplined synchronization. Each rider's eyes scanned the perimeter, hands poised, ready to respond to any sign of aggression. Arden could feel the collective focus as she stepped into the vehicle, the weight of Elias Rivers' legacy surrounding her like an invisible shield. Sheriff Halston watched from the bank entrance, his face a mask of frustration and impotent rage. Arden could see the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his deputies hesitated, knowing that any rash action would trigger immediate consequences. Outside, the riders subtly shifted their formation, engines vibrating in warning, a silent assertion of control over the perimeter. Inside the SUV, Arden held the reinforced case tightly. Counsel and Pierce flanked her, ensuring her security. The driver coordinated with the riders, waited for the signal to move. Arden could feel the pulse of the engines outside, a rhythm of loyalty and discipline that echoed her grandfather's values. As the convoy began to move, the riders adjusted seamlessly around the SUV, forming a protective cordon that moved in perfect harmony. Arden glanced out the window and saw the unwavering vigilance of the riders. Every eye alert, every engine ready. She realized fully that Elias Rivers had anticipated every possible threat, every attempt at intimidation, and had created a system that combined moral courage, legal authority, and disciplined action into an unbreakable shield. Halston followed briefly in his own vehicle, but he quickly fell behind, unable to breach the perimeter formed by the riders. Arden understood now that his authority extended only so far, and that the combination of federal jurisdiction and the riders' code of loyalty rendered his attempts futile. Inside the SUV, Arden opened the reinforced case just slightly, revealing the ledger and the flash drive. She ran her fingers across the smooth surfaces, feeling the tangible connection to her grandfather and the weight of responsibility. Every document, every note, every file represented not just information, but the moral and ethical guidance Elias had left behind. Counsel's voice broke through her thoughts. We'll move this to a secure federal facility. From there, the information can be used to investigate corruption, protect those in danger, and ensure accountability. You've done exactly what Elias intended. Your grandfather's legacy is safe in your hands. Arden exhaled, a mixture of relief and determination washing over her. She realized fully that her grandfather had not only prepared her for danger, but had instilled in her the courage, discipline, and moral clarity to act decisively. Outside, the riders' engines continued their steady hum, a heartbeat of loyalty and protection that would follow her wherever she went. As the convoy moved down the streets, Arden felt the weight of the legacy settle onto her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle. She understood the depth of Elias Rivers' planning, the precision of his foresight, and the moral force that now surrounded her. She was no longer just a girl in a biker jacket. She was the steward of a lifetime of courage, discipline, and integrity, ready to carry that legacy forward with every decision she made. The convoy rolled steadily toward the federal facility, the hum of motorcycles forming a disciplined barrier around the SUV carrying Arden Rivers, Counsel, and Special Agent Pierce. Outside, the riders maintained a perfect formation, each engine synchronized with the others, a living testament to Elias Rivers' foresight and the code he had instilled in them. Arden felt the weight of the reinforced case on her lap, the flash drive and ledger representing not just evidence, but the moral legacy of her grandfather. Inside the SUV, Arden's thoughts moved rapidly but deliberately. Every moment over the past hours had prepared her for this. The confrontation at school, the threats, the careful coordination with Lark, the moral and legal support of federal agents, and the disciplined presence of the riders outside. Elias Rivers had not only protected her, he had taught her how to stand firm under pressure, how to wield knowledge and loyalty as shields, and how to act decisively in the face of injustice. Sheriff Gregory Halston followed at a distance, his frustration mounting. He had tried intimidation, leveraging local authority, and even sending men to interfere. But the combination of federal jurisdiction, the presence of highly disciplined riders, and Arden's unwavering resolve left him powerless. Every engine outside served as a subtle warning that any rash action would be met instantly with coordinated force. The sheriff clenched the wheel of his car, jaw tight, realizing the full scope of what he was up against. Pierce glanced at Arden and Counsel. "We're almost there. Once we reach the facility, the flash drive and ledger will be secured, and a formal investigation can begin. Every move has been documented and every threat neutralized. Your grandfather's plan is working exactly as intended." Arden exhaled slowly, centering herself. Her hands gripped the reinforced case with precision. "It's more than a plan," she said quietly. "It's a code, a map of loyalty, courage, and moral responsibility. Elias knew the truth would need someone to carry it forward, and now it's my responsibility." The convoy approached the federal facility, the riders subtly adjusting their formation to allow a smooth entrance while maintaining security. Arden could feel the collective focus of the riders, the vibrations of engines like a heartbeat that ensured no harm could come to them during the transition. The facility's doors opened, and federal personnel awaited, ready to take custody of the case and begin the investigation. As the reinforced case was handed over, Arden watched every detail. Federal agents documented the handoff meticulously, photographing the ledger, the flash drive, and even the pendant that had guided her through every confrontation. The moral authority of Elias Rivers was now being formally recognized, and every step had been preserved as evidence. Outside, Sheriff Halston pulled up, his car idling tensely. Arden met his gaze directly as Piercy stepped forward. "Sheriff, your office is under federal review. Any further obstruction or interference will be prosecuted. You have been outmaneuvered by a combination of moral courage, legal authority, and disciplined action. Stand down." Halston's face paled slightly, the realization of defeat settling over him. Arden could see that he understood the full weight of what had transpired. His attempts to assert power through intimidation had failed, and the truth, meticulously documented and secured, could not be taken from her or from the law. Counsel nodded at Arden. "You've done exactly what Elias intended. The ledger, the flash drive, and every piece of evidence are now in federal custody. You've protected his legacy and ensured accountability. Now, his work will have the impact he intended: justice, transparency, and moral guidance. Arden felt a wave of relief, but also pride. She had been tested, threatened, and challenged, yet she had emerged resolute and empowered. She understood now that her grandfather's true gift was not just the evidence he left behind, but the moral discipline, courage, and loyalty he instilled in those who protected it, and in her. The riders, still forming a protective perimeter outside the facility, subtly shifted in acknowledgement. Their presence was no longer just a shield, it was a celebration of unity, discipline, and moral courage. Arden realized fully that Elias Rivers had created not only a ledger of debts and favors, but a living network of people and principles that would continue to act in alignment with his code. Halston, finally confronted with the reality of his defeat, stepped back. His deputies followed, tense and uncertain. The moral authority, legal authority, and disciplined presence of the riders had neutralized his attempts at control. Arden held the spoked wheel pendant in her hand for a moment, feeling the connection to Elias and the network of allies who had ensured her protection. Inside the federal facility, Pearson Council began documenting the handoff, ensuring that every file, photograph, and ledger entry was logged, time-stamped, and backed up. Arden watched closely, feeling the full weight of responsibility and the reassurance that the legacy was preserved. Every detail mattered, every step had been anticipated by Elias, and every action taken reinforced the principles of discipline, loyalty, and moral courage. Finally, as the convoy prepared to disperse, Arden took a deep breath. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the facility and the riders outside. Engines hummed in quiet acknowledgement, a rhythm of loyalty that resonated through the air. She realized that her grandfather's legacy was not just in documents or keys, it was alive in every person who had acted with integrity and courage. Arden looked at the reinforced case, the pendant, and the flash drive one last time before placing them securely in federal custody. She understood that the real victory was not just in exposing corruption or protecting evidence. It was in preserving a code of moral responsibility, discipline, and loyalty that would continue to guide those who followed it. As the convoy departed, Arden felt a sense of completion. Elias Rivers' legacy was safe, justice had been initiated, and the network he had built, riders, allies, and federal agents alike, remained steadfast and disciplined. She had been tested, challenged, and proven worthy of the responsibility, and the spoked wheel pendant at her chest weighs a constant reminder of the courage, loyalty, and moral clarity she now carried forward. And in that quiet, powerful moment, Arden Rivers understood fully. The jacket, the key, the flash drive, the riders and the code, everything her grandfather had built had converged perfectly. Justice, protection, and moral courage were not abstract ideals anymore. They were living, breathing forces, embodied in her actions and in the unwavering loyalty of those who had answered the call. Elias Rivers' legacy was complete, and Arden Rivers was ready to carry it into the future with discipline, clarity, and unshakable courage.